This is Killer Mike, also known as Michael Render. 1965 Voters' Rights Act just got gutted. They gutted it.
Yo, free grift giveaway, come get it. Run around the block.
Here for the free grift giveaway. Y'all got any more that grift?
Killer Mike might have just run into the exact consequences critics warned him about years ago. Because after years of giving speeches about politics, activism, voting, and real changes, people online are now turning his own words against him. And honestly, this situation is getting uncomfortable fast. Because critics aren't just calling Killer Mike wrong anymore, they're accusing him of helping create the political outcomes he's now complaining about. From Supreme Court rulings, to voting rights battles, to judges like Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch, a lot of people are now asking one brutal question: did figures like Killer Mike accidentally push communities in the wrong direction politically? And the craziest part, the internet isn't treating this like some random disagreement anymore. People are digging up old interviews, old speeches, old political takes, and comparing them directly to what's happening right now. Because according to critics, this was never just about being pro-black or revolutionary. They believe it became about influence, about status, about sounding intellectual online while ignoring the long-term consequences in the real world. And now, years later, those same clips are coming back to haunt him. So in this video, we're breaking down exactly why Killer Mike is facing backlash right now, the comments people can't stop bringing up, and why some critics believe this completely destroyed his credibility as a political voice. What's up, YouTube? Star Whisper here. And first off, can we give a huge round of applause to Reese Waters? I still don't know where he found that AI version of Candace Owens, but it was hilarious. Seriously, that was next level. But as funny as that was, today we're talking about a completely different kind of grift. Not the kind where someone shines up to white conservatives for approval, like Candace Owens. Today we're talking about the so-called pro-black militant Hotep grift. Yeah, that's Killer Mike. That's exactly who we're talking about. This is a different kind of grift. It's not only about money, it's about status. It's about getting invited to the roundtable discussions, the political meetings, the governor's office, all because you present yourself as someone with insight, enlightenment, and deep pro-black ideology. But the reality is, it becomes about ego, about prestige, about being viewed as the voice at the top of the list while pretending to represent black people. Meanwhile, in my opinion, you belong nowhere near that position. So let's get into what he said and why people are reacting the way they are.
Hey, what's up? Onyx Impact, Black Male Initiative. This is Killer Mike, also known as Michael Render. 1965 Voters' Rights Act just got gutted. They gutted it. They literally eviscerated it, and it's now trying to make it easier, or allowed it to be easier, for states to redraw district lines to annex those most in need out. This is not just black people and African Americans. This is poor people. So based on where you are, the more poor people that can chop you up, they can make sure you aren't voting on the behalf of the poor and the interest. They can make sure that it affects your schools. They can make sure it affects your jobs. They can make sure it affects every part of your life. So right now, you need to be putting pressure on our local politicians and local municipalities not to do this. You need to be putting pressure to make sure that those like you and like your neighbors still have the ability to exercise their full constitutional rights of voting, and it being effectively not eviscerated and us being taken back to Jim Crow. So we're going to start the largest voter initiative possible this fall. We're going to get people out to the polls. We're going to beat up those midterms, and going forward, we're going to do more than just march and protest. We're going to go to the polls. We're going to change the people who are in office. We're going to get those laws back changed in the favor of the people. This is Michael Render. Stay tuned. We're going to do something plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize big.
Oh man, that sounds great. We absolutely should be mobilizing people, especially black communities, especially after that ruling. On that point, he's completely correct. The problem is, according to critics, this situation is partly your fault. Killer Mike, you and others who push similar rhetoric helped create the environment we're dealing with now. That's why a lot of people don't want to hear these speeches anymore, because they remember comments like this.
Let me tell you a big reason I would never vote for a prosecutor. Because you were a fucking prosecutor. That's it. If you were a prosecutor, you were just on the wrong side. So as for me and my household, we vote for defenders, we vote for public servants, but we don't vote for prosecutors because I know you've been a part of the system that's already fucked me over. Why would I vote for you?
So how's that working out for you now? Seriously, how's it going? Killer Mike, you once argued that people shouldn't focus on presidential elections because local prosecutors matter more, right? Weren't you the one telling people to pay attention to local prosecutors because they handle the cases directly? So after voting locally, what happens next? Do those decisions never move beyond that level? Critics are saying that argument completely ignored the bigger picture. And according to them, that's only the beginning, because people also remember moments like this.
Why didn't you support Hillary Clinton?
I just don't believe in her leadership.
Even when Trump was the alternative? The only question where he didn't.
Why? I just don't. Look, okay, Libya. Who was Secretary of State when we went into Libya?
Hillary Clinton.
Who's the president? Barack Obama.
Yeah.
What happened after Libya fell? Slavery got reinstituted. What do those people look like? Me.
What are you even talking about? Hotep. That's the criticism people have. They say this is what the Hotep grifter does. You throw out historical references to sound intellectual and revolutionary, but the real-world consequences tell a different story. Critics say your argument basically came down to this, because Hillary Clinton served in an administration where bad things happened overseas. You were comfortable risking another Donald Trump presidency. Meanwhile, the same communities now affected by voting rights decisions are the ones paying the price. Critics argue that in reality, the president appoints Supreme Court justices, and those justices go on to make rulings involving issues like the Voting Rights Act, and they point directly at the judges who voted against those protections. According to them, those appointments happened because Trump won the presidency.
I, Amy Coney Barrett, do solemnly swear.
I, Brett M. Kavanaugh, do solemnly swear.
I, Neil M. Gorsuch, do solemnly swear that
Critics point out that all three of those judges were appointed because Trump became president instead of Hillary Clinton. And now when people look back at reactions like yours, they say it no longer looks clever or revolutionary. They believe your rhetoric directly contributed to the outcome you are now criticizing. They argue that you presented yourself as someone standing for the people, but when major political choices had to be made, your messaging helped push voters away from decisions that may have changed the outcome.
Hey, let me tell you right now, look at this. Look, freedom is at stake. And when they say freedom is at stake, what's at stake? Your constitutional rights are at stake. Your privileges are at stake. Your ability to get medical care if you're a woman is at stake.
Again, those speeches sound powerful online. They sound inspiring on YouTube. But critics say that when it actually came time to make difficult political decisions, the message led people in the wrong direction.
Roe a super precedent.
How would you define super precedent? And I'm answering a lot of questions about Roe, which I think indicates that Roe doesn't fall in that category. And scholars across the spectrum say that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled. But descriptively, it does mean that it's not a case that everyone has accepted and doesn't call for its overruling.
People also continue bringing up Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett and the role she played in major rulings, including Roe v. Wade. Critics say that while Killer Mike later expressed concern about those issues, his earlier rhetoric indirectly contributed to the political outcome that made those appointments possible. And many people online are now saying, welcome to the real world.
Judge, it is an important precedent of the Supreme Court. By it, I mean Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Been reaffirmed many times. Casey is precedent on precedent, which itself is an important factor.
Then there's Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, another figure critics continue mentioning. They point out that Kavanaugh was appointed under Trump as well. And according to them, this is why they rejected the argument that refusing to support Clinton had no consequences. They say all of these decisions are connected.
As the book explains, the Supreme Court of the United States has held in Roe versus Wade that a fetus is not a person for purposes of the 14th Amendment. And the book explains that.
Do you accept that?
That's the law of the land. I accept the law of the land, Senator.
And then there's Neil Gorsuch. Critics say that while Mike later spoke passionately about protecting rights and mobilizing communities, he ignored how much influence presidential elections actually have over the courts. That's why many people now accuse him of being more focused on image and ideology than long-term political outcomes. Some critics even compare his behavior to political grifting, though they admit it's different from someone like Candace Owens. Instead, they argue it's more about attention, influence, and political access. They also continue bringing up his appearance with Brian Kemp, claiming it reflected a desire for prestige rather than activism. According to them, people gave Mike too much credit politically, and now they no longer trust him when he calls for organizing and mobilizing.
You know that Killer Mike has a history of not supporting women running for political office? He didn't support Keisha Lance Bottoms' run for mayor. He supported her opponent, Vincent Fort. And Fort had a pretty progressive platform, so that's not the problem. The problem here is Mike's pattern. His support around Stacey Abrams was questionable because he was also in support of Republican Governor Brian Kemp. He was against Hillary when she was running against Trump, even after he knew that Bernie Sanders didn't have a chance to win the presidential election. He was against Kamala's run against Trump and even platformed RFK Jr. during this presidential campaign. And now he's complaining about what's happening to the Voting Rights Act.
Now, critics say they don't want to make assumptions, but they believe there's a noticeable pattern among some self-described pro-black militant figures online. In their view, it often becomes more about ego leadership status and public recognition than actually helping communities. And because of that, They believe Killer Mike failed politically. They argue that black communities are now suffering from decisions tied to the same political outcomes he once minimized. And they say people are no longer willing to accept him speaking as a trusted political voice. According to them, this situation proves elections have real consequences.
Texas, late today, President Trump saying Republicans are, quote, entitled to those additional seats, citing his victory in that state. Democratic lawmakers fleeing the state, trying to keep this from happening.
President Trump now arguing Republicans are entitled to 5 more House seats there because he won the state.
Critics also point to redistricting battles and larger political strategies tied to documents like Project 2025. They argue these efforts were always designed to eventually reach the Supreme Court and impact voting rights protections nationwide. And in their opinion, encouraging people not to support certain candidates indirectly helped create the political conditions for that strategy to succeed. They say this is why voting matters, not because politicians are perfect, but because every election shapes future power. And according to these critics, that's the lesson Killer Mike failed to understand.
Met with the president and he said, I know you need Voting Rights Act, but I just don't have the power. And so every argument that Dr. King gave, President Johnson's answer was, I agree with you, but I just don't have the power. And the reason he didn't have the power was the country was divided, so divided over Vietnam. That didn't seem to bother Dr. King at all. And so when we got outside, I said, you know, the president is probably right. He ignored me and just kept saying, no, we got to get the president some power. The 7th of March was, I think, the date. It was a panic. They were beating up people. I knew they were capable of doing that, but I thought they were smarter than to do that in front of all of the national press. That made America say, no, this is not the way we want to act. And it gave Lyndon Johnson the power he needed to introduce a Voting Rights Act.
Finally, many people online have been invoking Martin Luther King Jr. to make their argument. They point out that Dr. King did not vote because politicians were perfect friends or flawless allies. He voted strategically, believing pressure and activism could continue after elections. Critics say the point of voting is not to find a perfect candidate, but to choose the option communities can push in a better direction over time. According to them, refusing to engage politically out of frustration only creates openings for worse outcomes. And that is why they believe Killer Mike misunderstood the purpose of political participation in the first place. So, after looking at all of this, one thing is definitely clear. A lot of people online no longer see Killer Mike the same way they used to. Because for years, he was viewed as one of the loudest political voices in hip-hop. Somebody people trusted to speak on activism, organizing, and black empowerment. But now, critics are saying the same rhetoric that once sounded revolutionary ended up aging very badly once real-world political consequences started happening. And honestly, that's why this backlash feels so different. This isn't just people disagreeing with one interview or one opinion. People are going back through years of speeches, clips, and political takes, trying to figure out whether Killer Mike genuinely misunderstood the long-term impact of elections, or whether he cared more about sounding politically radical than being politically effective. Because according to critics, once Supreme Court appointments started shaping issues like voting rights and Roe v. Wade, a lot of those old arguments stopped sounding deep and started sounding irresponsible. But at the same time, supporters of Killer Mike would probably argue that he was encouraging independent thinking and focusing on local political power, not telling people to ignore politics completely. So now the internet is split. Was Killer Mike unfairly blamed for outcomes far bigger than one celebrity's opinion, or did his rhetoric actually help push people toward decisions they later regretted? Either way, this conversation clearly touched a nerve online, and with politics, celebrity culture, and social media becoming more connected every year, these debates are probably only going to get louder from here. But I want to know what y'all think. Do you think Killer Mike's past political messaging aged badly, or do you think people are looking for somebody to blame after the fact? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any future uploads. Appreciate y'all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.